Yeah, I know. I'm really late to this, okay? I just thought of this idea now. I don't know why I didn't think about this back then. I know that Mike from the Humanist Report had done a video on this back over in May, all the way back in May. So I'm doing mine in December, late December. But better late than never is the saying. So we're doing our 2020 Democratic tier list here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to include all the candidates. A couple of these candidates I'm actually not going to rank because I don't know jack about them. Like, there's a guy by the name of Sestak. I don't know anything about that guy. I'm not gonna lie to you, and honestly, I'm not even gonna dignify that guy's run with a ranking. And I think it's this guy who's Sestak, so we're not ranking that guy. But all right, here we go. So we've got all the candidates here. John Delaney, Auto F. Okay, just look at the man's picture in the first place again. A lot of times, John Delaney has the face of someone who got electrocuted and is basically attempting to, re-understand their surroundings, recover essentially, in that snap of a finger. It's like his face is it's a little crazy to me. But on a serious note, the guy trashes Medicare for all, and most importantly, he's actually a healthcare exec, and so he spent a bunch of money on his own campaign. I believe his dad was also part of the healthcare industry, the private health insurance industry, although I'm not sure. But that's why he's in this. And so anybody who's basically, in this scenario, they're not just a goon for the private insurance industry. They're a goon for, their own profits, essentially. So obviously I'm not going to support a guy like that. And he's a pretty big memester. So this guy's the ultimate loser. But he's provided for some really good memes. So shout out to all the Delaniacs out there in the chat. Okay. So next what we will do is we will put Pete Buttigieg. Now, Buttigieg is going to go in the... Oh, this is tough. I'm trying to think if I want to go Buttigieg in D or F. Now, I'm going to put Buttigieg in F as well, okay? Buttigieg is a centrist on virtually everything. Free college education, Medicare for all. And most importantly, my fundamental issue with Pete Buttigieg, similarly to, Mr. Delaney here, is that he's very calculated. He's a very, a big sellout to rich people. He basically admits that he's a sellout. He says, "Oh, I have to do these wine cave fundraisers for $1,000, a pop, and I have to have 39 billionaires donating to my campaign. I have to do this stuff." And he's very, he's contrived and he's fake. All right, the guy's a used car salesman. All right, he looks like a douche as well. But recently, I just covered the story about how he's trying to synthetically lower the average donation of his campaign by saying, "Oh, we're doing this contest. Everybody from this specific link donate a certain exact number, and anybody who donates like $1.69, for example, let's say no one else donated that, you win the contest." I don't know what the prize was, but very, very fake, synthetic as fuck. And that to me is the perfect example or explanation, I should say, as to Pete Buttigieg, and that's why he goes in the F category, okay? That is why he goes in the F category for me. Now, next what I'm going to do is... and by the way, I want to mention that Pete Buttigieg lied about being in favor of Medicare for all. He was basically, courting superdelegates. He was part of those secret meetings of the DNC. I mean, I shouldn't have to tell you guys this stuff, but, we gotta put that out there. Now, when it comes to Beto O'Rourke, I'm going to put him in the D category, although I'm tempted to put him in C. So, the reason why I have Beto in D is because it turns out he's not all as progressive as I had thought. I thought that, when he was running against Ted Cruz, I wasn't thinking of it as like, oh, he's just much better than Ted Cruz, so I prefer, Beto O'Rourke. I actually thought he was a real progressive. Turns out he doesn't support Medicare for all. Turns out he voted for Wall Street deregulation and all this other stuff. So it turns out to be that he wasn't all that progressive. He turned out to be a massive egotist and narcissist. He stayed in the race. He was also a shifty liar. He included donations for the general election fund, which can't be used in the primary, in his donor number to top Bernie Sanders to make headlines. Then he refused to drop out of the race despite him consistently polling at only 2 points. And, with all of those things combined, I'm not a big fan of Beto O'Rourke, to tell you the truth. He also never would talk about policy positions. He would do all these weird, OG Obama stuff, which doesn't work now. A and B, he was just terrible at it. He would get up on a table and he would just say, like, we can do this. We can come together and have a society and improve society, and then we can all get in a circle and jerk our own dicks off in sync. In sync. So that's why I don't like Beto. Okay, I was contemplating putting him in C tier, just because I don't think he's as bad as these guys. I don't know what it is about Beto. I don't hate Beto as much as I do the other guys. Not really sure what's up with that. But so next we shall put. I'm gonna put Kamala Harris in the F tier as well. Should I put Kamala in the F tier or the D tier? Man, these are some tough decisions to make, man. Oof. I'm gonna have to put her in the F tier. Okay, she's destroyed many of lives while being, DA of in SF and also being AG of California. She basically was a shapeshifter. I feel like I covered the Kamala Harris campaign pretty thoroughly at the time that she had announced and passed that. She was somebody who laughed off the idea of weed legalization in 2014. Was supporting policies of basically, putting parents of kids who didn't go to school in prison, which is a very harsh and stupid policy to do, especially because it doesn't get at the root problem, of course. But, what you're looking at here is a candidate who's a complete shapeshifter, and she's a liar and a fraud. Okay, she's a liar and a fraud. She claimed to support Medicare for all. She ended up backing off that as well. She then later on sold herself out, started going to, I did a story on this. She went to Martha's Vineyard and was going out there and meeting up with Obama bundlers and Hillary bundlers and all this other stuff. She ended up being a sellout as well. And she's a cop, dude. Like, let's keep it real. Not to say that all cops are bad or anything like that, but she was certainly a bad one. And so that's why I don't support Kamala Harris. You guys all know my reasons for this in depth. Now I had to put her at F tier just because not only is it that she did really terrible things, but that she also was actually a liar, which I take to be a serious hit on your campaign. Same reason why Pete Buttigieg is there. Now, man, I'm having trouble with some of these. Okay, so I'm gonna put Tulsi in B tier is where I'm gonna put Tulsi. Tulsi as a candidate, I'm not taking into account odds to win here, but Tulsi as a candidate is pretty good. She does have some questionable, things like her ties to like Modi and stuff like that are very questionable. She ended up backing off of Medicare for all, but overall, I still think that she would be better than, she'd be like a alright, president is what I would say. Now, she comes off as weird, and I'm really wary, I don't know which one to use there, of her decision making, because it just seems so erratic and random, and there doesn't seem to be any like logic behind it that I can understand. Maybe she's got some inside info that I'm not aware of. Entirely possible. I don't know. But that's why I'm gonna put her at B. Now, when it comes to Warren, I'm actually going to put at. Oh man, shoot! Do I put her at A or do I put her at B? This is a really tough one here. With Elizabeth Warren, the thing is that I'm going to put her at B as well. I would give Warren the edge over Tulsi for sure, just because I feel like I trust Warren more than Tulsi. Tulsi seems very ominous at this point. But the reason why I have Warren at B, she does have a progressive track record, obviously. She does support, a lot of the same proposals that Bernie does. Even though she's waffled on Medicare for all a bit, similar to how Tulsi Gabbard has. Pretty much no one stood still on M4A but Bernard himself. And, she supports many of the same policies that Bernie does, of course. And that's why I have her at B tier. And, for me, if Warren ends up being the nominee, it's not the end of the world. Is it as nearly as good as Bernie? Of course not. But it's not the end of the world if she becomes a nominee. Now, if Biden becomes a nominee, then we're screwed. We can go ahead and throw my main man Bernard up at S+. Bernie Sanders is the man, the myth, the legend, of course. The guy has a literal decade upon decade track record. We're talking about a guy who marched during Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. This guy marched in a protest, literally got arrested for that protest. Who can say that, dude? Certainly no one in the race can. He's the only one. But just imagine having that on your resume and your record. Like, wow, that is amazing. And so decade upon decade, I think there was a letter from him from like the 70s or something where he's talking about gay rights and trans rights, which wasn't even a topic at the time, and weed legalization, all this different stuff. And his record, go watch his no vote on the Iraq War. You know, he was literally a prophetic on what happened. And, you know, everything that he said he was worried about happening literally happened. So the man is has been right on virtually everything. And the reason why I love the guy so much is because he's so passionate on everything. But most importantly, we know he's real. We know that he supports these positions because he's supported them for decades upon decades. And that's why I love the guy so much, and I think that's why everybody loves him. He's not bought out by corporations. He doesn't make stupid decisions like other candidates do. He doesn't waffle on stuff. And he's just the best candidate in the race by a long shot, folks. By a long shot, okay? So Bernard, easy S+. Easy S+. Joe Biden. Joe Biden, I'm going to put in F tier as well. Joe Biden, I'm going to plop in F tier because he's not mentally stable, doesn't have the mental capacity to be president of the United States. I mean that with all seriousness. The guy can barely, speak coherently, which is very concerning for a president of the United motherfucking States. Very obviously, of course. And so with Joe, he's mentally, incompetent, doesn't have the mental health to be president of the United States. I'm very worried about his viability as a candidate versus Donald Trump. I'm very worried about his odds in a debate against Trump, considering his mental health. Very worried about his debate viability, considering the weird stuff that he's done and how I feel like Trump can harp on that, whereas he can't do that with Bernie. So I have all those concerns about about Joe Biden, sorry. But most of all, Joe Biden is dude from my dude still thinks it's the 60s. He made a comment saying that he thought that weed was a gateway. And then he backtracked like a couple days later, which makes me think he's lying about a bunch of shit too. But obviously he's not for Medicare for all. He gets really angry when Bernie raises his hand to oppose him and give his side of the argument. He's bought by rich donors. He's got more billionaire donors than Pete Buttigieg does. He does, his very first fundraiser was with the Comcast. I think it was the CEO. If not CEO, some high-ranking exec. So, I hate Joe Biden. He's absolutely terrible. Now, next what we got, let's see, who are we putting here? We got Andrew Yang. I'm going to put Andrew Yang in, I'm going to put him in D tier. Honestly, I have a lot of people in the F tier, man. But Andrew Yang, I kind of want to put in F tier because I just did a video about his backing off of Medicare for All and basically exposing him for just straight up lying about Medicare for All, or his support for Medicare for All, that is. He doesn't support Medicare for All. He never supported Medicare for All. And I hate candidates who are not transparent about what it is that they support. To me, that is the ultimate sin as a candidate. I want you to be honest and upfront with me. What the fuck do you support? Tell me what you support, and then I will make my decision as to whether or not I want to support you based on those policy positions. But when you lie to me about what you support, I can't trust you anymore. Especially considering that it's literally a healthcare plan, which is the most focal issue in this election from my perspective, from my opinion, okay? He seems to be Milton Friedman, essentially. So I don't like Milton Friedman. I like listening to him to hear his thoughts. I don't agree with any of them, okay? You know what I'm saying? I'm a fan of the FDA. I'm not opposed to that kind of a thing. I support a federal jobs guarantee. Not that the FDA is, Yang's position. I'm saying it's Milton's, obviously. But, he seems to be pretty libertarian in his belief system and quite the huckster. So that's why I'm putting him over there. Now, next up, going to put Gravel up here. Now, I'm going to have to put Gravel up at, I'm going to put him at B as well. Now, the reason why I'm putting him at B and not at A, S, or S+, is just because, he's not like a serious candidate, right? He was a candidate who's going to go on the stage and just basically roast Joe Biden like he did back in 2008. And I respect that. And I like Mike Gravel. He's a bit weird on the conspiracy side for me. But regardless, I like the guy. I think he's cool. I support his positions. Or at least most of them anyway. The vast majority of them, I would say. But the reason why I'm putting him at B and not higher than that is just simply because he wasn't running to win. Okay, he wasn't running to win. And he was the one who wanted to endorse Tulsi. Remember how like his endorsement got split between Tulsi and Bernie? He was the one who wanted to endorse Tulsi, and my understanding is the people who ran his Twitter account, the kids who ran his Twitter account, were endorsing Bernie. So, keep that in mind as well. Now, we've got Mr. Cory Booker here. Cory Booker, I'm going to put this dude at actually first I'm going to put Gillibrand at C is where I'm going to put her. The C category is kind of empty, and Gillibrand is not as bad as someone like a Kamala Harris, at least from my understanding of, her as a candidate, of course. Like, she's not as bad as Kamala Harris. Like, there's some bad stuff that Gillibrand has done, but it's nowhere near to the level of Kamala Harris, not even close. So I'm going to put her at C for that reason. She's obviously not my favorite candidate or anything like that, but not even close for that matter. But she's not as bad as some of these other candidates are. But when we talk about Cory Booker, I want to put Cory Booker at do I want to put him at D or C? I feel bad leaving the C category so wide open. So the thing about Cory is I don't really like the guy, but at the same time I don't really care about the guy. I don't really care about Cory. I don't really give a shit about the guy. And so I'm super torn here as to whether or not to put him at C or D. But the reason why I don't like Cory is simply because he's clearly there were also those tapes that were re-released or resurfaced of him making up a guy named T-Bone and all this stuff. But he was the one guy one of the Democrats who actually voted against a Bernie Sanders amendment that would allow the U.S. to import prescription drugs from Canada. So that tells you kind of all you need to know. Cory Booker is a big sellout to corporations. Obviously, he's a centrist guy. That is who Cory Booker is. That's why nobody really cares about him. He's not interesting in any way. And he's kind of like SpongeBob from that episode in which, when they turn normal and he goes, "Hi, how are you?" That's what I think of Cory Booker as. So you know what? I'm pretty torn between the D and C spot, but I'm just going to keep him. I'm just going to keep him at D, honestly, because why the fuck not? Julian Castro, I'm going to put it at C. He did come out and defend Bernie Sanders recently. He does seem to be pretty strong on, what's going on at the border, and that seems to be kind of his focus. But I don't really dislike Julian as much as I thought he did, because he did take a pot shot at Bernie once, but it seems like that's not really his interest, and he did defend him recently, so he doesn't seem to be one of those candidates who's polling super low, who's trying to take pot shots at the top candidate just to get some attention. And also, he did go after Joe Biden, so I'm gonna put him at a C. Now, Hickenlooper, I'm gonna put at an F. This guy's a massive clown, obviously. Hickenlooper, he was a big fracker, so I believe he was the former Colorado governor. So that's kind of all you need to know. Anybody who's made money off fracking and is a big fracker, I ain't supporting you, buddy. And he was one of those. He was one of those moderate candidates, of course. And then what we got left here, some candidates I don't want to rank. It's hard to tell who some of these guys even are, but I know that's Eric. I'm definitely not ranking Eric. I'm not ranking Tim either. Not ranking Moulton. Not ranking Massam. And Klobuchar. Klobuchar, you know what? I'm gonna put Klobuchar as a D. I'm gonna put Klobuchar as a D just because she's a centrist. Obviously, she's the living embodiment of Karen or a boomer, whatever you want to call it. You guys remember her saying, notorious RBG, just really, really cringe stuff. Okay, very cringe. She's to be honest with you, she's literally a centrist, she's like Mayor Pete in that matter. She's a big time centrist. Okay, she's a centrist on health policy. She's a centrist on education. Virtually everything, she comes down the middle. So I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a centrist by any means, and I find her personality to be very cringe. And I felt like she was very abrasive in the previous debate. She's a candidate polling at 3.3%. She's definitely not making it to the next debate. But she kept chiming into arguments that were between serious candidates that were being substantive. Those being substantive arguments, like healthcare debate between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, and then you jump in. It's just ridiculous. Totally, totally ridiculous. So then we got Michael Bennett here. Michael Bennett, this guy, I'm also gonna throw in as a D. I don't know why it is I'm not putting him at an F, but Michael Bennett's actually a blue dog Democrat. If you don't know blue dog Democrats, they're basically conservative slash basically center Democrats. So, he's somebody who's literally a centrist on virtually everything, and he did go off on Ted Cruz that one time, which is really cool. But that was him going off on Ted Cruz from the perspective of a blue dog Democrat who is tired of lunatic Republicans who won't even concede with the people who are blue dogs like Michael Bennett. So that tells you all you need to know about this guy. He's a centrist, doesn't support Medicare for all, and I don't like centrists. So we've got Bernard at S+. He's the GOAT. At B tier, we've got Tulsi, Warren, and Gravel. C tier, we've got Kirsten and Julian. And then at D tier, we've got Beto, Yang, Bacher, Klobuchar, and Bennett. And then at F tier, we've got the main man, John Delaney. Shout out to all my Delaney-acts out there. Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and John Hickenlooper. Now, to be quite honest with you, what I could do is I could drag like most of those people in D tier down to F tier, but I feel like it would make for a shitty tier list if just everybody, if there's one person in S+, 3 people in B tier, and then virtually everyone else is in F tier. I don't think that would make sense. So, anyways, people like a Kirsten or Julian are not like great candidates or anything, but yeah, that's my tier list. Let me know what you think down below.